Hello YouTube. What's new? What's new with me? I'm feeling better since my last video, so we're good there. It's the week of, is it the week of Halloween? What are days, guys? Don't know. It's the week of Halloween, so I'm doing a bit of a spooky, quote unquote, scary, quote unquote, not really. I'm doing a bit of a Halloween inspired video, hence my pumpkin shirt and my green headband to act as the stem of the pumpkin. However, upon putting it on, I realized that jack-o'-lantern pumpkins tend to have brown stems, and I already had brown hair, so I tried. Halloween isn't my favorite holiday. Christmas is. So yeah, this is as much effort as you're gonna get from me. So today's video is called Cold Call Horror Stories, as you saw in the title, because I think I'm hilarious. And I was asked to do this video back in the summer, and I just never got around to it. But also, I came up with the idea of the title then, and I was like, oh, that's a perfect October video. I don't know how Zoom law school is going, because I didn't do that. I did in person the entire time. So I don't really know how cold calling works. But before I get into the actual stories I have, and I have, how many do I have? 3. I have my notes right here. 4. I have 4 stories. I'm going to actually discuss a bit about what cold calling is, and kind of give you some tips and tricks and stuff. So what is cold calling? Cold calling is basically the bread and butter of the Socratic method, which is what law school is based on. And I'm going to be frank with you. It's completely pointless. In my opinion, it doesn't teach you any more than just a regular lecture does. In fact, I learned better from the regular lecture style, and I was very happy that I had a few teachers that actually did that more, or they incorporated a more lecture heavy style with the Socratic method. They didn't just focus on the Socratic method, because one of the things law school is really good at is teaching you a bunch of nothing. They want you to come to the answers from reading a case, which doesn't always work when you don't know what you're looking for. Yeah, so cool. Yeah, that's what cold calling is. Basically, you are in class and teacher says your name. They usually have a seating chart. You have assigned seating in law school. They usually have a seating chart, and they'll look down and be like, oh, Miss Pfeiffer, can you tell me what the facts of the case are? And that's when your heart starts beating and you're like, oh my God, I was called on. What do I do? And it's freaky. It is freaky from 1L year all the way up till 3L year. So how do you prepare? Well, you read. That's about all you can do, and I'm going to be honest with you. It is okay if you're wrong. It's not like the Legally Blonde thing. You're not going to be asked, what's mens rea? That kind of question is never asked. Usually you get to mens rea by talking about a case and being like, well, what? You explain, you basically give the definition of mens rea, and then your professor will be like, oh, that's mens rea. They had the mens rea there. You know, it's not going to be, at least in my experience, I never had an experience quite like what it was in Legally Blonde, because I know that's the movie that people tend to equate with law school, because you do actually get to see some law school classes. I don't know about other law schools, but when it comes to if you don't know the answer, it's okay. If you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know. You shouldn't be, in my opinion, if your professor tears down at you for not knowing an answer, they're not a good professor. And if they open it up to the rest of the class, you shouldn't have a girl that's behind you going like, I know the answer. That shouldn't happen. And if it does, you need to find yourself a healthy group of friends, because that's not a healthy environment. I was lucky that my law school wasn't anything like that. Usually, if you didn't know an answer, your professor would give you a few tries to and their questions would be more tailored to guide you to the correct answer, rather than just being like, oh, you don't know, moving on. but I will say that's not always the case. So yeah, so when it comes to cold calling, there are different types of cold calling. You will have a professor who is probably older, on the older end. I had a professor who was once the dean of our law school, who he was like, he's old school. He opened up his seating chart and just picked people off his seating chart. And he had his favorites too. By second semester, he definitely had his favorites because he knew the ones that knew contract law, because he's my contract professor. I wasn't one of those, so I got cleared from being cold called on a lot because I went to him a lot and I was like, I am struggling understanding this. So yeah, you'll have one of those most likely. You will likely have someone who plans ahead. And when I say this, there's two types of planning ahead. We had one professor, I never had him, who sent out a list of 5 names before class, and those are the 5 people that were going to be on call the entire time of class. You're probably going to have someone like that. I didn't. The other type of like preparedness is one of my professors, he's my con law professor, and he was really good. And he numbered everybody in a random number generator, and then he would just go down the list 1 through whatever. You didn't know what your number was, but you knew that once you were called on, you wouldn't be called on again. And he just went through the number list. So those are like 2 types. And then the other type of cold calling is when it's more lecture based. So you'll have a little bit of a lecture, and then you'll get into the cold calling process, and you'll have more lecture and then back to cold calling. And it's very balanced, and I loved that. My Civ Pro professor did that, and it was a blessing because it really helped me learn Civ Pro. So that's the basis of what is cold calling. So let's get into the stories, because that's what you're really here for. So we're going to start off with probably my favorite cold calling story. It didn't happen to me, it happened to a girl in my class. This was second semester 1L year. And I want to say it was pretty early on in the semester, because our professor like made fun of, like, this became an inside joke with our class, and he made fun of her for it every single day, or every time he called on her afterwards, because what she did was she was describing the facts of the case. And our professor is old, he was older, but the person in the case was only like 45, and my friend, she y'all, she was like this really old guy, and the professor like stopped her and he's like, really old, and she like turned bright red, and it was hilarious. And yeah, he ribbed on her about it for the rest of the semester. It was a joke. We all knew it was a joke. Like, at that point we knew our professor, because at my school at the time, most of our 1L classes were split between 2 semesters. Now they do it a bit differently, where they usually have like all your classes 1 semester and then all the other ones that you didn't get the next semester. I liked the 2 semester thing, but that's not how they do it anymore. But we had already had him for a whole semester, so we already knew like his style. He liked to joke with us, but it was absolutely hilarious. She did not live it down. Like, I think she ended up giving a speech at graduation, because she ended up being our SBA president, and I think she even made a joke about it in her speech. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure she did. It was very funny. Like, when you get to that point in the semester, even if it's a 1 semester class, by the time you get to like your 4th or 5th class, you get the like vibe of the professor. So you're gonna have jokes. Your class is gonna have inside jokes. Funny things are gonna happen, and that was one of the funny things that happened. So not really a horror story, but still really, really funny. Okay, so the next one is a bit of a horror story. So we were in Civ Pro my 1L year, and I don't remember if this was 1st or 2nd semester, but the class as a whole was struggling hard with this concept, and none of us were prepared for the questions that were being asked. We had all done the reading, because I was like, the row I sat in was with like all the super smart people, and then there was me, who's not super smart. But they were struggling, and I was like, I'm struggling. And our Civ Pro professor started at this far end of the row, and I was more towards the other end, but still in the middle, and she just started calling people down the row because people didn't know the answers. And she stopped right when she got to me, and I was like, oh, thank God, they finally answered the question. And then she went to a different row, and I like looked out at the girls and I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. I had no reason to be sorry, but yeah, that was very scary because I was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna call me and I have no idea how to answer the question she wants answered. But luckily, by the time it got to the girl before me, the question had finally been answered, but it was kind of a bit of a ruthlessness because she was just picking us off one by one. And like, you could, like, I love this professor, I love my Civ Pro professor so much, but you could tell she was like angry that we just weren't getting it. And she was like, did they even, like, you could feel that she was like, I don't even think they did the reading. And we all did, because I could see their books. They were all highlighted. They all had their notes. And I was like, oh, we are just stupid today, guys. Like, what is the deal? Like, why are y'all being like me? Because y'all are the smart ones. But yeah, that was very nerve-wracking because I could see it coming, like just a train coming down, and there was no way to dodge it. Luckily, the question finally got answered, but it was, y'all, it was, okay. So my next cold call story is actually how it saved my butt when I studied abroad. So when I studied abroad, we went to England. As you all know, we had two, if you watched my study abroad, Oxford is better than Cambridge video, we had two classes when we studied abroad. We had our SMU, I just said what school I went to. I went to SMU. We had our SMU class and we had our Oxford class. I've been trying to keep that a secret, but now you know, yay. So we had our SMU class and our Oxford class, and our SMU class was taught by a professor from our school, and the Oxford class was taught by a professor from Oxford University. And one was longer than the other. One was a tutorial in the Oxford style. One was just regular Socrative. And because we were abroad, a lot of people took a lot of liberty and they didn't really do the reading. In my class in particular, I had the easier class of the two. I think maybe 4 people read every single thing. And I was one of the few people that answered questions every single day in class. And that saved my butt, because pay attention after your 1L year, because participation can sometimes be part of your grade. Even if it's 10%, that little bit does help. So if it is part of your grade, make sure you actually pay attention and try to answer a few questions, because that saved my butt. That study abroad class was my highest grade in law school, which is embarrassing to say, but it was, and it's because I answered questions every day and did all my work, instead of lazing about like a lot of people did, which I'm not gonna like knock them for, but it saved me. And so my last cold call horror story was one that happened to me, and this one is a true horror story because I had never been called on the first day of class up until my 3L year. This was like first day of the semester with my con law professor, who scared me. Like, he was brilliant, but I was terrified to answer questions for him because I was like, I'm going to get all these questions wrong. So it was Con Law 2, and for those who don't know, Con Law 1 is like very history based. It's all the historic cases. Con Law 2 is more like all your amendment cases. And so we were at the very beginning of the semester, and I had done the reading the night before, and I felt prepared, not enough to answer questions about the cases, because I just never felt prepared enough to answer questions about the cases. But we get to class, I'm there set up, ready to learn, and he calls on me, Miss Pfeiffer. What? I was the first one called on. That had never happened once. I thought I was going to get out of law school scot-free of being called on the first day, and it didn't happen. And I was terrified. You guys, my heart was beating. I was like, I'm going to get these questions wrong. And he asked me a question, and I was scanning through my notes. I was like, where did I write this stuff? Because I know I wrote about it. And by the time I finally got my answer out, I'd gotten like 3 text messages from a friend who was in the class as well, but she was a few rows ahead of me. And they, like, this is what I loved about my school, is that like even if I wasn't best friends with the person, we were all willing to help each other out. Like, these girls were so smart. They knew I wasn't smart, but they were so willing to help me out. And they sent me all the answers by the time I'd already answered. And it was nerve-wracking, and everybody feels this way about this professor. It's so nerve-wracking. And being cold called on the first day, first thing up, it's scary. It is so scary, guys. And I hate to say that it's not scary, but it's scary. You will be nervous until you are cold called on. Like, luckily, once I was done with that, I was like, oh, thank goodness, I don't have to worry about being called on. I just have to do my reading and pay attention. But man, being called on the first day, it is the most terrifying feeling because you don't feel prepared. Most of the time, you can pretty much feel prepared, but not this time. No. And I hate to say that, but there's just no way that you're going to feel prepared and you're going to like finish answering your questions and you're like, I totally failed all of that. Like, I did not answer any of those questions right. I did it all wrong. And then you're going to talk to people after class, and like, if you have like a good environment in your law school like I did, they were all like, you rocked those questions, you did so good, I was so scared for you, but you did so good, you did better than I could. You want that, because then you're like, yes, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as my mind is telling me it was. So yeah, that's my last horror story. I was terrified. Like, I got through all of law school without being cold called the first day of 3L year, where 3L year is supposed to be your easy year. It's supposed to be just sliding on through. I was like, I had an internship, and like, it was supposed to be easy for me, and then I get cold called the first day of con law. It was stressful, but I did it. And honestly, like, when that happened, it gave me flashbacks to 1L year, second semester, when I was cold called on. And I got really lucky from this same professor in my 1L year, because we were talking about separation of powers, and doing like the cake layering thing and the mixing of the marble cake. If you know separation of powers, that'll make sense to you. And luckily, I got the easy questions out of that. The other person he called on, like, had to work real hard, and I was just like, that was easy for me, but I was like, and people were like congratulating me after that class, but I was like, no guys, y'all need to go congratulate him, because he had the harder questions. I would not have been able to do what he did. And it like brought me back to that moment, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know how he felt now, because it's terrifying when you get hard. Like, and the thing is, the questions I was answering, they weren't even that hard. I was just like freaking out, because when you look back on it, you're gonna realize the questions weren't actually that hard. You're just freaking out so much that they seem a lot harder than they are. But you're gonna freak out. Like, I don't know a single person who's not freaked out by a cold call, whether it's your 1L year, your 3L year, whether your first day or the last day. You freak out. It happens. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. I hope you all have a great day, week, month, year, whenever you're watching this.